Husband's shocking secret revealed. 8-month baby involved. The smell of lavender laundry detergent still clung to Mark's shirts, even after a full day at the office. It used to be a comforting scent, a reminder of the cozy evenings we spent on the couch, Leo nestled between us, cooing at the TV. Now, it just made my stomach churn. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Mark's late nights at work. Urgent deadlines, he'd say, kissing my forehead before slipping out the door, the click of the latch echoing through the quiet house. I attributed it to the pressures of his job, the transition back after his paternity leave. Being a software engineer at a company like Apex was demanding. I knew that. But then came the phone. He used to leave it face up on the kitchen counter, buzzing with notifications. Now, it was always face down, tucked away in his pocket, vibrating silently during dinner. He'd jump at the slightest sound, his eyes darting nervously around the room. "Everything okay?" I'd ask, trying to keep my voice light. "Yeah, just work," he'd reply, a little too quickly, a little too defensively. The first real red flag was the text. I wasn't deliberately snooping. I swear. I grabbed his phone to look up a recipe for Leo's baby food, and a notification popped up on the screen. "Can't wait to see you tonight." My blood ran cold. I clicked on the message. It was from a number I didn't recognize. "Who is this?" I typed, my fingers trembling. The response came instantly. "Someone who appreciates Mark." I deleted the message and the thread immediately, but the damage was done. A seed of doubt, a poisonous weed, had taken root in my mind. I spent the next few days replaying every interaction, every conversation, every gesture. Suddenly, everything seemed suspicious. The way he'd avoid eye contact, the hushed phone calls he took in the garage, the vague excuses about where he'd been. Olivia, my best friend since college, was my lifeline. "Maybe you're just being paranoid, Sarah," she said, sipping her iced tea. "Postpartum hormones can do crazy things. Have you talked to Mark about this?" I hadn't. I was terrified of what he might say, or worse, what he might not say. "Just confront him," Olivia insisted. "Tell him how you're feeling. Communication is key." Easier said than done. I decided to do some digging. I started by checking his emails when he was in the shower. Nothing. I scrolled through his social media. Nothing obvious. But then I saw it. A comment on a picture of Emily, a coworker he'd mentioned a few times. "Looking good," he'd written, followed by a winking emoji. Emily. I'd met her at a company picnic last summer. She was younger than me, maybe late 20s, with long blonde hair and a bright, easy smile. I remember thinking she was nice, friendly. Now, I saw her differently. I saw her as a threat. The picnic. I remembered Mark spending a lot of time talking to her. I dismissed it at the time, chalking it up to work stuff. But now, I started paying closer attention to their interactions. At another company event, I watched them from across the room. The way she leaned in when he spoke, the way he lingered a little too long when he shook her hand. It was subtle, but it was there. A spark, a connection. One evening, Mark told me he had to work late. A huge project deadline, he said, his eyes avoiding mine. I said okay, kissed him goodbye, and waited until he left. Then, I got in my car and followed him. He didn't go to the office. He drove to a small Italian restaurant on the other side of town. And there, waiting for him at a table, was Emily. I sat in my car, watching them through the window. They laughed, they talked, they held hands across the table. My heart shattered into a million pieces. The next morning, I called Detective Harding. I'd found his number online, a private investigator specializing in infidelity cases. I need proof, I told him, my voice trembling. I need to know everything. For 2 weeks, Detective Harding followed Mark. He documented everything: his meetings with Emily, his phone calls, his text messages. The evidence he presented was damning. Photos of them kissing in the parking lot of the restaurant, records of hotel reservations, transcripts of their conversations. It was worse than I imagined. I confronted Mark that night. I laid the photos on the table, one by one, like playing cards. He stared at them, his face draining of color. "Sarah," he stammered, "I can explain." "Explain what, Mark? Explain how you lied to me? Explain how you betrayed me? Explain how you risked everything we have?" He tried to deny it at first, but the evidence was overwhelming. Finally, he broke down. "I messed up," he sobbed. "I made a mistake. I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough, Mark," I said, my voice cold. "Sorry doesn't erase what you've done." Then, as I was about to walk away, he said something that stopped me dead in my tracks. "There's something else," he whispered, his voice barely audible. I turned back to face him, my heart pounding in my chest. "What is it, Mark?" He hesitated, his eyes filled with shame. "It's about Leo." I stared at him, confused. "What about Leo?" He took a deep breath. "Remember when Dr. Lewis mentioned Leo's blood type at the last checkup? How it was unusual?" I nodded slowly. I did remember. Dr. Lewis had mentioned something about it being rare, but I hadn't thought much of it at the time. "Well," Mark said, his voice cracking, "it's not compatible with mine and yours. He can't be our biological child." The world started to spin. "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Before we got married," he began, his eyes pleading with me, "I found out I can't have kids. I convinced you to go through with IVF. I couldn't tell you the truth. I was afraid you'd leave me." "You used a donor?" I whispered, "without telling me?" He nodded miserably. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about my marriage, about my family, was a lie. The man I loved, the man I trusted, had been deceiving me for years. Not only was he having an affair, but he had also concealed a huge secret about our son. The next few weeks were a blur of tears, anger, and sleepless nights. I kicked Mark out of the house. I consulted with a lawyer. I struggled to explain to Leo why Daddy wasn't around anymore. Olivia was my rock. She helped me pack up Mark's belongings. She took care of Leo when I needed to cry. She listened to me rant and rave without judgment. I confronted Emily. I found her address online and showed up at her apartment one afternoon. She looked surprised to see me, then ashamed. "I didn't know about Leo," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I swear. I didn't believe her, but I didn't care. I just wanted her to know the pain she had caused. "You destroyed my life," I told her, my voice trembling. "You and Mark destroyed everything." I walked away, leaving her standing there, speechless. Mark tried to contact me, begging for forgiveness, promising to change, but I couldn't forgive him. The trust was gone, shattered beyond repair. I filed for divorce. The legal process was messy, complicated, and emotionally draining. We fought over everything. The house, the finances, custody of Leo. Mark's parents sided with him, of course. They couldn't believe I was throwing away my marriage over one little mistake. They didn't understand. It wasn't just one mistake. It was a pattern of deceit, a web of lies that had poisoned our entire relationship. In the end, I won custody of Leo. Mark got visitation rights, but I made it clear that I would do everything in my power to protect my son from his father's toxicity. I moved into a smaller house, closer to Olivia and her family. I started working part-time, balancing my job with motherhood. It wasn't easy, but I was determined to rebuild my life. One afternoon, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from the sperm bank. Apparently, they were updating their records and needed my consent to release information about Leo's donor. I hesitated. Did I really want to know who Leo's biological father was? What if it complicated things even further? But then, I looked at Leo, playing happily on the floor, his bright eyes filled with innocence and love. He deserved to know the truth about his origins. I signed the consent form and mailed it back. A few weeks later, another letter arrived. Inside was a profile of Leo's donor. His name was David. He was a musician, a painter, a free spirit. He lived in California. The letter also contained a contact number. I stared at the number, my heart pounding in my chest. Should I call him? Should I try to connect with Leo's biological father? I didn't know what to do. I felt lost, confused, and scared. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. It rang and rang, then went to voicemail. "Hi, this is David," a voice said. "I'm not available right now, but please leave a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can." I hung up without saying anything. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, wondering what the future held. I had no idea what would happen next, but one thing was certain, my life would never be the same. Mark's actions had irrevocably changed everything. And now, I was left to pick up the pieces and try to create a new life for myself and my son. A life built on truth, not lies. A life where Leo knew he was loved, unconditionally. Even if that love came from a source I never expected.